Okay, Mark 14. Okay, this is about the woman that turned up to Jesus with the alabaster jar. So I'm starting off from verse 3. It says this: There came a woman having an alabaster box of ointment of spikenard, very precious, and she broke the box and poured it on his head. And there were some that had indignation with themselves, and said, Why was this waste of ointment made? For it might have been sold for more than 300 pence, and have been given to the poor. And they murmured against her. My guess is that it was probably more than 300 pence today. It's probably very, very expensive. I think I heard someone say it was like a salary or something, but nevertheless very expensive, and could have been sold, and the money could have been given to the poor. So it's like, why did you do this? But verse 6 says that Jesus said, Let her alone, why trouble ye her? She hath wrought a good work on me. For ye have the poor with you always, and whensoever ye will, ye may do them good, but me ye have not always. Jesus was about to die, and he was saying that the poor will always be with you. The poor will always be available. And in the UK it seems to be getting worse. There's loads of people living on the street. But the thing is that Jesus is not here forever. There's a time for you to find him, and the time is whilst you're living. But he was saying, she's done a great thing for me. And he continues, listen to this: Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached throughout the whole world, this also that she hath done shall be spoken of a memorial for me. Because in verse 8, she hath done what she could. She is come aforehand to anoint my body to the burying. You see, she recognized that Jesus was about to die, and people may not have accepted it, but she was preparing his body for burial. Jesus, God's one and only Son, was about to die. Now in verse 21 it says, in verse 22 it says this. This is Jesus at the Last Supper with the 12 disciples. He broke the bread and he said, Take, eat, this is my body. And symbolically he was saying, look, this is the body that I'm about to give. You should break bread in remembrance of what I've done for you. So he was saying, I'm going to give my body, and you're going to take that yourself and consume it. So I'm giving my body for you freely. And then he continued in 24, This is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many. So he was going to be killed, and his blood would come out. And in the blood is the life, says the Bible. So like he was giving his life for the whole world. In the Old Testament, it says in here that in the Old Testament that there's no forgiveness without the shedding of blood. The idea is that the like eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth sort of thing. You commit sin and you shed an animal's blood to basically offset the sin that you committed previously. And Jesus is the ultimate, perfect, spotless lamb. He never sinned, he never did anything wrong, and he was willing to give his body and his blood for us. So the shedding of Jesus' life was to offset the sin of the entire world. And the woman with the alabaster jar, she recognized that Jesus was about to die, and she prepared him for burial. But in verse 28 it says this. It says, Jesus speaking, After that I am risen, I will go before you to Galilee. He was telling them quite clearly, look, I'm going to die, but I'm going to rise and come back to life. I'm going to resurrect. I'm going to defeat death, is what was happening here. So although he knew that he was going to die, and it was going to be a horrible death on the cross, he knew that he would resurrect and defeat death. He was confident of that, and he gave them many hints about his resurrection. And in verse 34 it says this. This is him sort of praying to the Father. Well, not praying to the Father yet, but he said this, look, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful unto death. Although he knew that he was going to defeat death, he was, sorrowful about what was about to happen, as anybody is. If we're going to go to, if we have the death sentence, which is basically what Jesus had, or we have like a terminal illness, we're sorrowful for that. No one wants to go through death, and neither did Jesus. In fact, he prayed in verse 36, Abba, Father, all things are possible unto thee. Take away this cup from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what thou wilt. The cup is not the blood that he was drinking earlier. It's like a symbolic kind of cup of God's wrath. And he was saying to his Father in heaven, look, please take this cup of wrath from me. That's how sorrowful Jesus was. He didn't want to die. He didn't want to do this. He was sorrowful. And he was about to experience the most crazy pain. And he was saying, look, please take this cup from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will. Jesus was obedient unto death. He was willing to come, I believe, and to die. But his willingness was because of the willingness that he had for the Father, because he's always in agreement with the Father. And although he struggled with it, he was saying, I will do your will. And every Christian has to give themselves as a sacrifice, as an offering, and we have to do it to God's will, because many of us, the sin that we have to give up, the gospel sharing, the witnessing that we want to do, many of us don't necessarily want to do it, but we'll do it because of God's will, because we love him, and we know that God so loves the world that he wants everybody to be saved. He wants everybody to be saved, and we might have a problem with making ourselves look stupid in front of people by either being holy and receiving criticism for it, or going out there and giving the gospel, yet we're doing it for the Father's will, because that's what he wants his children to do. And in verse 39, they came to arrest Jesus with swords and staves, and Jesus said, I was daily with you in the temple teaching, and ye took me not, but the scriptures must be fulfilled. The Old Testament said that all these things would happen to Jesus, and the scriptures needed to be fulfilled in order for God's promise and God's sovereignty to be displayed, that he was going to be doing it through Jesus Christ, is God's only Son, the Son of Man. And they asked him if he was the Christ, the anointed one, the Son of the Blessed. And in verse 62, Jesus said, I am. And ye shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. When Jesus comes again in his second coming, he was saying, you will see me in the clouds of heaven before they get to the great white throne of judgment. Now, all of this, the reason why I'm saying all of this, and there's a lot here, isn't there, is that this lady with the alabaster jar, she anointed Jesus for his death. And she gave this immensely precious thing. And there's nothing that we can give Jesus everything, anything that's precious for us, we give it to Jesus. But we know that the regardless of the cost, we will always have the poor. But it's more important that whenever the gospel is proclaimed, we bring the gospel to people, because that is what brings salvation to the whole world. And the gospel is that Jesus died to pay off all of our sin, that he was buried to show that it actually happened Do you know what I mean? He was buried for 3 days, which the Jewish people would recognize that this guy is definitely dead. But then he rose again as he promised. And all of this was according to the scriptures. Many people saw it. And that he's coming again. He's coming the second time. But when he comes the second time, it's not going to be, him coming as a peaceful servant. He's coming for judgment. He's coming as sort of like the son of war. So yeah, these verses are really important in this Mark 14, and I just wanted to share it because it's basically the gospel outlined, and it gives a promise in here that verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached throughout the whole world, this also that she have done shall be spoken of for a memorial of her. And as a memorial of her, I'm sharing with her the precious gift that she gave for the gospel of Jesus Christ. And the precious gift that we can give is ourself, because God loves us so much that he gave his one and only son. God bless you. Thank you.